It's not fair that a whole big group of people get a benefit and only one person has to pay to obtain. It's not fair that one nation defend Western civilization and the others do nothing. And it is not sufficient that governments send help and individuals don't do anything. We are each citizens of some nation, and we each have a role to play, and we each can play a far bigger role than we can imagine. My name is Brother Alexis Bagnola. I'm co-founder of Ordo Militaris Catholicus, an international association of Catholics dedicated to defending Christians of persecution. And I find myself this morning in the plaza of St. Michael, the Archangel, in front of his monastery here in Kyiv, where the Maidan Revolution began in 2014 and where many a military man is buried. The Ukrainians are paying with blood and guts and bones of their soldiers, of civilians, men, women, and even children, the price of liberty in the West. There is no religious liberty in Russia. There is very little human liberty. It's an absolute kleptocracy. And a kleptocracy is, what is a kleptocracy? Imagine if the Sicilian mafia not only was in your town, but ran the government and were the police. Kind of a town you'd have. So the Russian mafia is much worse than the Sicilian mafia, and the Russian mafia is the one that runs Russia. That's who runs Russia. Putin and his cronies are mobsters. Communism never ended in Russia. What happened was that Putin and the KGB decided to rob all the property that belonged to the Communist Party. And the people who rule Russia are Putin and the Jewish oligarchs. Very few of them are Russian Orthodox, and none of them are believers, as you can see from the actions of the so-called Russian Orthodox Church. The other day, their patriarch slipped on holy water. That tells you something about what Christ thinks of the Russian Orthodox Church. A thing I've never heard of in any other Christian church ever. So it's not fair that they're paying with blood. Now, I want to address myself to all those Christians in the West who have been talking about Kulturkampf for the last 200 years. So Kulturkampf is a German word. It means the struggle of cultures. And I think it was Bismarck who popularized it as a political agenda to persecute religion. And he persecuted all the Christian churches under under the Prussian state. When southern Germany, Catholic Germany, made the mistake of uniting with Prussia. That was like the downfall of Europe. And but in the West, since the time of the Second World War, there has been a big push by international Marxism and the Soviet Union, and Russia still does this, to break down Western society and destabilize our institutions, destroy our families, and mess us up demographically, morally, and economically as much as they can. And that effort has attacked culture, attacked the meaning of words that are fundamental to society, like male, female, father, mother, family, government, rights, liberty, to oppress us. And yes, this is part of the globalist agenda, but in this battle, many a Christian scholar has talked about Kulturkampf and the necessity of Christians not only to defend individual Christians, but to defend our Christian civilization from this attack. And I appeal to all of those out there, because there are many Catholics, conservatives, traditionalists, and Protestants who might apply those words to themselves too, who understand the importance of cultural warfare. There's even a magazine called Cultural Wars or something of that sort. So I ask you, how can you defend Christian civilization from destruction if you're not going to help Ukraine, who is holding back the dike, the dam? And don't imagine that Russia wants the Ukraine. Russia has made quite clear they don't need part of the Ukraine. They don't even need the whole Ukraine. Their intention is to genocide the Ukraine. And why do they intend to genocide the country? Because the Ukraine has Western Christian civilization. And the kleptocracy of Russia cannot endure this. They do not want freedom and liberty on their borders. And I don't mean it in the Western secular sense of freedom and liberty. I mean in the sense that we all expect it. You can have, in the Ukraine, you can have Catholic churches and Orthodox churches and Catholic churches and Baptist churches. There's something like 50 Baptist churches in Kyiv. Most people don't know that. There's a lot of Protestants in the Ukraine. And you can talk to someone about Jesus Christ on the street. You cannot do that in Russia unless you're Russian Orthodox trying to recruit someone to the state church. We have, and the churches in the West are independent from the state. They have always been, at least in the Catholic tradition. There's no independence of the church in Russia. We expect transparency, honesty, integrity, and fiscal responsibility from our governments in the West. You know, that's just all a myth. In Russia, it's actually an established system of theft, and that is not Western civilization, that's Mongolian. So, is it fair that the Ukrainians are paying in blood, bones, and guts of their soldiers, of their adult civilians, of their women and children, and we enjoy the liberty? Is it sane to imagine that if we do nothing, everything is going to go right? Well, I'm going to tell you this is not going to happen, because Russia has 20 times the artillery and can draw on 320 million population. Ukraine is only 45 million. That's like imagining that California could resist an attack from the rest of the United States, to use a comparison that Americans might understand. It's the same proportions, more or less. It's not fair, and it's not honest. So as we Christians, if we are authentically interested in defending Christian civilization, then the litmus test of our integrity, of our moral integrity, is whether we're going to support Ukraine. That's the litmus test. If you don't support Ukraine, materially, financially, morally, militarily, religiously, in this fight against Russia, then you've been faking it. You might have written a lot of articles, you might have done a lot of talks, you might have gone to fancy liturgies here and there and said, oh, we have to oppose Marxism, we have to oppose cultural wars, but you're faking it, because it is the Ukraine that is fighting this war. They're really fighting a war, and if you're not supporting them, then you don't really care about defending Christian civilization. There's Christian civilization here, you can see it. I put my camera in this angle this morning. That's Christian civilization. Whether you're Orthodox or not, you recognize that that is Christian civilization. If I turn around here, you recognize that that is Christian civilization. You can see St. Sia Cathedral in the background. That's Christian civilization. My ability to stand here at minutes after the curfew and make videos without being interrogated or even having my passport controlled by the secret police who are looking for Russian spies, that is civilization. I have not met in the West saner people than Ukrainians who know how to balance the threat of war and acts of terrorism or espionage and the welcoming of foreigners, which are totally two different mindsets. One is fear and suspicion, the other is welcoming and trust. Balance both in the same mind of the same person at the same time, even someone who doesn't have much education. That's something that can no longer be done in most minds in the West. So Ukraine is a reserve. It's like a natural preserve of Christian civilization. You don't realize it until you come here. We have a duty to defend the Ukraine. We have the duty to support Ukraine. And Order Militaris Catholicus, we have a whole bunch of projects where we're doing this because we are defenders of Christian civilization, because we are defenders of Christian persons. God bless. Ave Maria.